possibility, some of the options they're talking about would be an in-person interview. Likely it would be done by Robert Mueller. I mean, you're talking about the President of the United States here, and you don't necessarily send just your rank-and-file investigators in to talk. It may be the special counsel that would have to do that interview. They're also talking about maybe submitting some written answers to questions that are submitted by the special counsel's office. And then another potential option might be that the president would swear out an affidavit presenting his part of the story here and the way that he sees everything. Certainly the president's legal team is not talking at all about this. John Dowd, who is his chief outside attorney, in a statement to Fox News said, quote, "The White House does not comment on communications with the OSC out of respect for the OSC and its process." That's the Office of Special Counsel. The White House is continuing its full cooperation with the OSC in order to facilitate the earliest possible resolution. Over the weekend at Camp David, the president did reaffirm something that he said months ago, that he would be willing to talk with Robert Mueller, but he again asserted his innocence in all of this, saying that there was no collusion, no crime. Shep?
John, today the president is traveling to Nashville, as I mentioned, with one of his top Republican critics in the administration, Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee. Senator Corker once called the White House an adult daycare center and observed that the president is utterly untruthful. President Trump gave the senator the nickname Little Bob Corker and said he couldn't get elected dog catcher. The president and his team also continuing to push back against the controversial new book from the author Michael Wolff, which portrays the president as unfit for office. Top members of the Trump administration making the rounds on the Sunday talk shows yesterday to defend the president and blast the book, while the president's former chief strategist Stephen Bannon issued a statement saying he regrets he didn't respond sooner to what he calls the book's inaccuracies. Back to John Roberts at the White House. John?
What's really interesting here, Shep, too, just to contrast that with where the president's going today, is you can criticize the president, as Bob Corker has, as Rand Paul has in the past, as Lindsey Graham has, and you can still fly to your home state with him aboard Air Force One. But you criticize his family, well, that's a whole different ballgame. I wouldn't say what Steve Bannon released yesterday to Fox News counted as an apology. It was probably more like a clarification of what he said and what he meant when he talked about that meeting back in 2016, June of 2016, between the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and that Russian attorney as being treasonous. Steve Bannon coming out and saying, hey, I wasn't talking about Donald Trump Jr. In fact, in a statement to Fox News, praising Donald Trump Jr., saying, quote, "Donald Trump Jr. is both a patriot and a good man. He has been relentless in his advocacy for his father and the agenda that has helped turn our country around." Now, you notice he didn't go back on saying that that meeting was treasonous, but what he did tell Fox News was that he wasn't talking about Donald Trump Jr. when he said it was treasonous, as we see Air Force One landing in the fog and the rain there in Nashville. He was talking about the president's then campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. In a statement to Fox News, Bannon saying, quote, "My comments were aimed at Paul Manafort, a seasoned campaign professional with experience and knowledge of how the Russians operate. He should have known that they are duplicitous, cunning, and not our friends. To reiterate, those comments were not aimed at Donald Trump Jr." He pointed out that Bannon did express his regrets that his delay in responding to the charges in the Wolff book took away from the president's agenda. But again, Shep, he hasn't walked any of that back. And I'm not sure that the mea culpa that he issued yesterday and the explanations have done anything to reinstate his standing with the president. The president, it would seem, Shep, is still very much PO'd at Steve Bannon, calling him Sloppy Steve over the weekend.
And it appears that they've sent out an army of defenders, top U.S. officials, to say that the president is indeed fit for office.
Notable among them is Chief Policy Advisor Steve Miller, who got into a shouting match with Jake Tapper on CNN yesterday in his Sunday morning program, to the point where Tapper cut off Miller's microphone, and then the two of them proceeded to have an off-camera discussion. Also out there was the CIA Director Mike Pompeo, who said that things that have been said about the president not having the mental capacity to be president are absolutely ridiculous. Listen here.
Those statements are just absurd, Chris. I mean, just pure fantasy. The president is engaged. He understands the complexity. He asks really difficult questions of our team at CIA so that we can provide him the information that he needs to make good informed policy decisions. Statements like the one Mr. Wolff made about how we all think about the president, they're just ridiculous on their face.
Mike Pompeo on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace yesterday. And the president so far, Shep, has refrained from commenting at all about Sloppy Steve or the Wolf Book or anything that doesn't have really to do with policy. He's hoping when he visits the Farm Bureau Federation annual convention, the first sitting president, by the way, in 25 years to do so there in Nashville, that it will be all about policy. It'll be about agriculture, trade, and tax cuts. Shep?
John, the plane has clearly landed, as you referenced, but before it did, there was a bit of a White House gaggle there on the plane. Hogan Gidley, one of the spokespeople, came back to address the media, and one question was reaction to Mr. Bannon's statement, and Hogan Gidley said, this President's press secretary quoting, "I don't believe there's any way back for Mr. Bannon at this point." He's kind of out there on an island now, isn't he?
It might seem pretty difficult. Again, Shep, as Bob Corker has proven, as Lindsey Graham and others have proven, you can criticize the president. You can even very, curtly criticize the president. But if you work with him, you can find your way back. But you criticize the family. And some of the things that Steve Bannon was alleged to have said about Donald Trump Jr., that he says he was talking about Paul Manafort and about Ivanka Trump, that there may be no road back from that. And certainly when you see people like Rebecca Mercer, who was one of his big financial backers, now distancing herself from Steve Bannon, you really wonder if he can have any kind of influence over the 2018 elections. But don't forget, Shep, a day in politics is a long time, a week is forever, and there's a long time between now and November.
Much is being made, John, of the new schedule for the president, which lists 3 hours of executive time in the morning, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., and the spokesperson was asked about that. This executive time report, and the spokesperson said, "Ludicrous when the president is up before dawn, wee hours, few hours of sleep. President works tirelessly, results don't lie, spends morning time talking to cabinet, chief of staff, etc." It's out there, and much being made of it in some areas.
One thing I could tell you about Shep from covering him on the campaign is that this is a guy who can best any of his aides, who are in many cases half of his age when it comes to stamina. And